Afternoon. And if for any of you who happen to have had Steve show up at your office, you understand why I'm here. It was my agreement to do this speech was really the only way I could get him out of my office, to be honest with you. But no, truly, a huge thank you to Stephen for his absolute passion for this work, for these issues, and the incredible job that he's been doing for quite some time for Cochs. So, Stephen, thank you so much for all that you do. As I was preparing to talk to you today, what really struck me is that this is really kind of a duh moment. We know the answer to the question here. It is basic, simple common sense. It is, as some would call it, it's mother's wit. It is the fact that we know for a fact that we are incarcerating people who are having mental health issues. We know that. And we know for a fact that we are not providing them with the treatment that they need so that they can be successful when they come out. It's kind of stunning that we are in this position where we know the problem. We know that when we lock people up and don't treat the problem, that we're simply growing the problem. And we know that if we allow this problem to fester and we put people out on the street who we have not properly treated, that they're going to recidivate. It's like this is a common sense idea, a common sense problem with common sense solutions like the Excellence Act, and we aren't doing it. And that's the thing that is so troubling. So in the parlance of the White House, I have right now 409 days until the weekend. Okay? That's the amount of time that we have left of President Obama's administration. And we and the president cares deeply about this issue, deeply about the fact that so many of our children, especially our brown and black children, are growing up with a parent who is incarcerated. The numbers are astounding, that so many of the people who we are incarcerating are people who we should be helping. That's really America's promise, is what do you do for those who are most in need? And that we have limited time to get this done. And that one area where we can we can have an impact, because it's an area which we all kind of get and understand and know the need of, is mental health. And so what can we be doing with respect to mental health? And we know that, we start seeing this in our schools and in our school discipline. Who are the kids who are getting disciplined the most in our schools? It's the kids with disabilities, it's the kids of color, it's the kids who have mental health needs, it's the kids in families where there are untreated mental health needs. And so because of that, the Department of Education and the Department of Justice created something called the School Discipline Guidance, how to give teachers the tools that they need to ensure that kids succeed. And that we're not kicking kids out of school early, where we know that once you kick a kid out of school, that they're going to fall behind, they're going to quit, they're going to drop out, they're going to become parts of our juvenile and criminal justice systems. So we have this guidance, this beautiful package. We even create a hashtag, Rethink Discipline. And yet the common sense message of that is not getting around. We have all these school districts that are still engaging in zero tolerance policies, are still doing things that are backwards. And so we will keep pushing for those 409 days and hope that more and more take it on. But then but we also look at it with respect to the people that we are locking up, and we just did this convening last week on fees, fines, and bail, and the fact that we really have criminalized poverty. You have a person who gets a $25, a $50 traffic ticket. They can't pay it in May, but then in June we double it to $50 or $100, expecting that suddenly now they have twice as much to make that payment. And then they don't pay it in June, and so what we decided to do is let's boot their car. Because what's really a smart thing to do is make it harder for them to get to work. And so we do that, and then we're surprised when they don't have a job. And we're surprised when they're struggling even more, and when their families are struggling even more. And how can we be more honest about our system? If we want new and better parks, and if we want new and better police officers, we're actually going to have to pay something for those things. But let's not pay it on the backs of those who are most in need. But we look at our criminal justice system, and we did a convening on something called law enforcement assisted diversion. The idea that if we in fact help people instead of locking them up, that we can be more successful as a society. And so law enforcement assisted diversion, it's in Seattle. I know that Santa Fe is looking at it, and Albany is looking at it, and we heard that Maine is probably going to do something around this, is the idea that police officers and prosecutors and district attorneys can get together with social workers and take those individuals who are struggling the most and not even book them. We all have heard of diversion, where you book the person has to plead guilty, and sometime many years later we can expunge the record. But what if we don't even book them? What if we actually take the time to provide them with the mental health services, the addiction services, the educational services, the family services that they need without even booking them? We're talking about having 2.2 million people incarcerated right now. We're talking about having 70 million people with a criminal record or an arrest record where they'd have to check that box on an employment form. That's 1/3 of the adults in our country. We as a country should be better than that. So what if we don't send them that way? And what if we actually put some money and some resources into programs where we divert people to the mental health services they need on the front end, instead of waiting until the problem is exacerbated and trying to fix it on the back end? It seems like this shouldn't be that hard. This isn't novel. So then what happens when we in fact lock them up? And we lock them up and we warehouse these people. And we have them in a situation where we're better to provide them with educational and skills and mental health and addiction programming. We're better. They're not going anywhere. And yet we fail repeatedly. We talk about right now having a 60% recidivism rate coming out of state and local facilities, a 40% recidivism rate coming out of the federal government. That doesn't make any sense. You're locking someone up to let them out, to know that more than 50% of the time they are going to reoffend in some way. We've got to do better. It's a waste of time, it's a waste of money, it's a waste of community, it's a waste of family, it's a waste of human being when we keep doing these things over and over again. And that's the importance of the Excellence Act. The only problem with it is that I don't remember it having a 409-day date when it was actually going to start moving. And so in some ways I can't wait. I'm too impatient to wait for that. So what can we be doing now? And the other problem is I'm not only preaching to the choir, I'm preaching to the preachers. I mean, you're the individuals who know this, who go out there and are saying, we have to change these things, we can do better, we have to do more. So what can I tell you that's going to do more, that's going to help, that's going to send it along? Well, the one thing we need to do is we need to use social media. We need to get this message out in ways that we're reaching people who otherwise wouldn't hear it. We need to challenge our city councils and our mayors and our state legislators. We need to take things like the school discipline guidance and put it on their desk and ask them, what are we doing with respect to this? We need to take the correctional educational guidance. I'm not sure if all of you know there's correctional educational guidance for juveniles, created again by the Department of Justice and Department of Education. I mean, it's a nice document. It's really, it looks really nice on a shelf. It looks even better in practice. What are we doing, not only ourselves to challenge the leaders who can make a difference, but what are we doing to spread the message that this is a difference that we no longer have any time not to be making? We spend $80 billion a year on incarceration. That's actually real money. I mean, sometimes we talk in millions in the government, and we're like, oh yeah, we just need 10 million for this, and everybody's like, oh, that's not that much money, that's good. We can do that. 80 billion is real money. 80 billion is a real opportunity to do so much more and so much better than we currently do. And if we put money into mental health services and addiction and education and skills, think of all the money we will save to then use for the things that we really want as Americans to be putting our money into. And I really think that we can do this. You know, we talk about things in the White House right now like the sexual abuse to prison pipeline. Why so many of our girls and young ladies end up in the criminal and juvenile justice systems. Well, what's missing? Why is that pipeline run that way? Well, one is because we fail to be victim-centered, but number two is that when people are victimized in this way, we're not providing them with the mental health needs, the mental health care that they need. How do you take someone who has been sexually abused and then wonder later why it is they are engaged in some kind of criminal activity? As opposed to, if they've been sexually abused, how do we make sure that we're providing them with what they need to be lifted up, to be in a better place? We need to do these things. We need to do things like, so the president has a task force on 21st century policing. And a whole bunch of that task force on 21st century policing, or a number of the recommendations in there, talk about crisis intervention training. Talk about the fact that our first responders need to have the tools that are necessary that when someone is in mental health crisis, that they don't pull out a gun, that they bring in an expert, a social worker, a mental health professional who could actually talk to and work with that individual, talk them down, get them to the services that they need. How about we do a little bit more of that with that $80 billion? How about if we train all 18,000 police departments on how to deal with someone who is in mental health crisis? I think that may be a better use for that money. We're talking right now in the White House about solitary confinement. The president directed the Attorney General to come up with plans on solitary confinement to severely limit its use. I mean, again, this is that duh moment. We lock a person up for 23, maybe 24 hours a day with no human contact, and then we release them right onto the street. And then we're surprised when something goes wrong. But we do that. And that's a mistake. So what are we going to do better? What are we going to do differently? How do we make sure that we're not locking people up for being mentally ill? I worked in the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice when we issued our findings letter at Crescent Facility in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And as we broadened that out later, it was after I left, that the Special Litigation Section broadened that to the whole state of Pennsylvania. They were locking people up for being mentally ill. Exactly what they're doing was caused by their mental illness, and then they locked them up into solitary confinement. And then people are surprised that they're not successful when they get out. This is the common sense message that we, as the preachers around criminal justice reform, need to be getting out there, need to be telling more people about, need to be doing more about. Because it is so incredibly important, because it impacts everybody. If it doesn't impact you individually, you have that family member who has it. If it's not you or that family member, that neighbor has it. If it's not you, that family member, that neighbor, that kid who's going to school with your kid is in need of this. This impacts everyone's lives, our failure to provide proper mental health services. And our failure to do it in prisons and jails and correctional institutions is embarrassing. Because we have an audience there who is in a position where we can provide it to them, and we need to do so. And then when people come out, the president went to Newark, New Jersey to talk about reentry services. And this is the same president who was the first sitting president to ever go to a federal correctional institution when he went to El Reno. Why did he go there? He went there in part to remind this country that those are human beings that are sitting in there. That the people who he sat down with are going to be getting out just like approximately 600,000 people walk out of prisons and jails every year. 600,000 people. Those are human beings. And if we don't treat them like human beings, if we don't provide them with the needs that they have, we can't expect success on the back end. So he talked about reentry. And he talked about the needs for what we do when people leave these facilities. What do we have to provide them? Well, he made it clear that OPM is going to ban the box on the federal government. Okay? And I mean, that's just following what 19 states have done. It's what the government had largely been doing already, but making it clear to people that it's not just bad policy. It's bad for this country to prevent a person who is formerly incarcerated from getting a job. And so we as a federal government need to make sure that we are being an employer, a model employer with respect to this. He also made sure that a lot of our grant making is open to people who are formerly incarcerated so that they can get jobs. The Secretary of Education announced Pell for prisoners so that they can get an education. We know that a job and an education and mental health treatment and addiction programming are all the keys to success when people get out. And unfortunately now, the number of people who've been touched by our criminal justice system is pretty much 100%. In some way, we are all touched by our criminal justice system. So, my answer to you on this common sense solution, on this mother's wit is, we just have to keep talking. We have to keep talking and keep doing. Because eventually somebody's going to hear us who matters, who cares, who's going to do something about it. I mean, we are at in a time when there is pretty much no bipartisanship. We look at criminal justice and we are as bipartisan as can be. I'm on speed email right now with Mark Holden, the General Counsel for Koch Industries, as we talk back and forth about what can be done on criminal justice reform. And I truly believe that he cares deeply about this issue. I mean, they banned the box at Koch Industries, like Target and Facebook, Home Depot, Johns Hopkins Medical Center. The right and the left get that. And look, I'm not going to ask you for your motivation. If your motivation is financial, so be it. If your motivation is moral, so be it. Let's just get it done. And so we have the Sentencing Reform and Corrections Act of 2015 that this administration is really pushing to get to the president's desk. Because it's a start. It's a start in the right direction. It talks about reentry services on the corrections side of it. It talks about what we can do better, what we can do legislatively. But it's a start. 2.2 million is too many. We've got to bring that number down. And all I can say to all of you is thank you for what you do. Thank you for all your incredible hard work. Please keep pushing, because we're better than this as a country. So thank you so much for your time.